And so for my whole life, when I was a kid, I was bullied a lot because of my name. People made fun of my name as I became a teenager. I didn't go to proms. I didn't go to dances. I didn't date, people because they didn't want to be known that they're dating Bambi. And then when I got married, none of my husbands would call me by name. They would just make fun of my name and things like that. If I met a guy out on the street, or any activities that we're at, guys would say, "Oh, where are you dancing tonight?" Thinking that it's a show name, it's a dancer's name, and I would begin to make jokes. I'm a mother of 6. I've never been on a pole. Trying to make it funny and stuff like that. But when I was like 32, 33 years old, I finally had it, and I wanted to change my name to Janet. And so I went to the courts and found out that it costs about $800, that you can change your name for about $800. So I was like, okay, that's an idea. I can change my name. But I went to the beach, because that's where God speaks to me, and that's where I can get angry and frustrated, and he's still there for me. So I went to Lake Erie, and I sat on a rock, and I cried out to God, and I said, "You knew me from the foundations of time. You were the one that called me by name. My mother just said it, but you had already planned it." And so I went through everything that I had gone through, how dare this happen to me, blah, blah, blah. And, I just vomited it on God. And I said, my name's not even in a name book. There's not even a meaning for my name. So you gave me a name that had no meaning. So do I have any meaning in my own life? So I then said, I'm going to go back to the bookstore. I'm going to go one more time. And if my name is not there tomorrow morning, I'm going to the courts, and I'm going to change my name.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. I have someone on the podcast today who's been actively on podcasts talking about her journey as an author. 2 books right now and more to come. And her website is healingthroughstories.com. And I'm excited to have Bambi Lynn on the podcast. Bambi, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you here.
Well, thanks. I'm so excited. I was looking forward to this podcast, for the last 2 weeks. So I'm glad to be here.
Wow. Well, I've been looking forward to this podcast too. And I'm excited to have you come on. You've been on many different shows, talking your books and stuff. And we have some connections pretty close to where I live, to where you are from and know people from. So, but where are you joining us today?
Well, just like you said, I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and I transplanted myself a couple years ago to the Golden Isles, which is Brunswick, Georgia. But nice. I'm a transplant, so I'm a diehard Buffalo, still a Buffalo, New York fan here, but...
Yeah, with a little less snow, I guess, down there than Buffalo for you?
Absolutely. A lot of rain, though. Monsoon rain.
So are you still cheering for the Bills down there or what?
You know what? I think that once you are from Buffalo, I think that you still always cheer for the Bills. The only thing is with the Bills is that they get their team all excited and all riled up, and then they compute us. So it would be nice if sometime that they could rile us all up and take us to the end.
Okay, so for all the Bills team and players hearing this today, that's what you need to do, is actually win. Just finish. Just go all the way to the end. Hey. I think maybe that's something they haven't considered. I don't know. Maybe we've brought a new idea for them. And maybe that could be the...
So. I mean, you would have thought somebody would have told them that early 80s. You would have thought they've been doing this how long? And you would have thought that they would know that they need to be finishers.
They're probably hand to the forehead that's not what we're not doing. We're not winning.
Wow, why did I think of that?
Bambi Lynn saves the day. There you go. So congratulations, Buffalo, on your win. Thanks to Bambi Lynn. This is good. Awesome.
Exactly.
Good. I love it. Yeah, because I'm here in Niagara, and Buffalo's great. I've been there many, many, many times. Some NHL games, too. I love the Sabres. Fun games to watch. Great crowd. Buffalo are amazing people, so that's good.
We sure are, even if we transplant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, always from Buffalo. That's good. You have a couple books out right now. Can you tell us about your books and a little bit about how you got started as an author?
Absolutely. Well, I was thinking when knew that I was going to do this podcast, I was thinking about different word pictures of life, so I was thinking of, the life of a butterfly, like the butterfly starts off, as a seed, and then it continues and it's a caterpillar, and it has to get really fat until it finally is in a cocoon. And then the cocoon tries to do, does some work, and it comes out as a butterfly. I think that that's part of what our lives are like, is that, we're always transforming. We're always becoming, who we were always meant to be. And so I was thinking about that, and I wanted to start off, thinking about things in life, that life doesn't change, but how you look at life continues to change. The older you get, the more that you look at your past, and you look at the trauma, and you look at all the things that you've been through. The older you get, you're able to look at those and say, I think there's some lessons to learn, and I don't have to stay in the trauma.
Yeah.
So I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about life, as a mom, you have one baby in your arm, you have one child holding your hand, you have another child kicking and screaming because they want the candy, and the mother finally lifts her hands up in the air and says, take the candy, I'm too exhausted to even think about it anymore. Those are kind of like life scenarios that you think about in life. So, my journey as an author, started years ago as my story was being written. When I was in 7th grade, I had a 7th grade English teacher. She has now passed away. But we had to write a story in her class about a window, of us looking inside of a window. And what did we see? And we had to tell the story of what we saw inside of that window. And some people picked a police car window, an ambulance window, any kind of window that you were looking into, and tell a story of what you saw. So I actually secretly told her my story of what was happening with inside of my window in my life. And the different trauma and the different dysfunctions that were going on within my home. I told my story thinking she would never guess it was my story. Just, it was just a window, because that's what we were told to do, just a window. After I did the story and she graded it and things like that, she then said, Bambi, can you come into my office after class? And her and I didn't get along, but I still loved her, because she was just an amazing teacher. But I chewed gum all the time in her class. So she always made me put gum on my nose.
Of course.
And I talked continually. So she made me stand in the corner with the gum on my nose and standing in the corner. Today, I still chew gum every single day. I don't think there's ever a day that goes by that I don't have gum in my mouth. And there's never a day that I'm not stopping a stranger to talk to them. So I went into her office, and she said, Bambi, she asked me to sit down, and she said, I just want you to know that you have a gift. And one day you're going to write a book, and you're going to represent this school as an author, because you have a tremendous gift, and I don't ever want you to stop, writing. At that time, I didn't understand what that meant, because everything was so dysfunctional in my life. I had a dad that my parents split up back and forth, because my dad was a brutal, mean alcoholic. Didn't get sober until he left my mom, and stuff. And there was some sexual abuse in my family by my grandfather. And things were just turmoil. So I didn't understand when somebody spoke into your life until years later, when I had friends that kept telling me, Bambi, you have a gift. You can write with such compassion, and you captivate an audience and things like that. So I began this journey of asking God every year on my birthday, going to a beach, going to some water. My birthday is on January 8th, which is Elvis Presley's birthday, if anybody doesn't know that.
All shook up. I like it.
Yeah, so if you don't know that, and I would go and ask God, is it time to write my story? And every year he said no. My story was being written on my heart, but he wasn't giving me the okay to write my story in words on a paper that turned into a book until 2 years ago. I went to Jekyll Island in Brunswick, Georgia. And I sat and I said, God, is it time to tell my story? And I came home and I saw my rag doll sitting on the shelf in my guest bedroom. And I had this aha moment that it was time to write my story. And that God had been writing my story for 54 years, but now was the time for me to put it into words. And it took me 3.5 weeks to just write my story, because it took me 54 years to live it. Wow. And I took my story, The Journey of Josephine, That is the title of my book because I told it through the eyes of my rag doll that was my security blanket and knew my secrets, in my life. And so she went on this journey with me. And that's why I titled the book, The Journey of Josephine. Nice. And when I published it on June 9th of last year, I also entered it into a contest, a writing contest. And I won first prize on my cover. And I won second on my writing ability inside of my book. So that was my first book that I wrote. And it has become a story of itself. And I tell people all the time, people ask me, Bambi, why did you write your book? Why'd you write it? And I tell them all the time, I wrote it for you. Because somebody has to be strong enough and step up and say, I'm going to do this because the next generation needs this, or the next person needs this in their life. I was brave enough to be able to tell my raw story of my life from childhood, abuse. My dad was an alcoholic. I was a black sheep of the family. There was some suicide attempts in my life, from husbands that cheated on me, infidelity within marriages. Another husband decided that hitting me was the way that he was going to keep me in line, to being a single mom, to having brokenness. I took my journey so that somebody else can take theirs, because I just really believe that our stories are not meant for us. Our stories are meant for the people behind us. And if we can be brave enough and raw enough to be able to tell our stories, other people will have that courage to be able to tell theirs. So that's why I wrote this story of, the story of Josephine, the journey of Josephine.
And okay, so Josephine is with you at all times then, right?
She is. I still own her. She's 47 years old. She doesn't look real good, but on the cover of my book, she looks pretty good.
There you go.
So she does look, because my daughter, antiqued it for me and stuff like that. So it made it look, she definitely doesn't look this great.
She's not listening right now, right?
No, she's been through some stuff.
She's got some scars. Yeah. Yeah. I have my original Winnie the Pooh that I got when I was like an infant. I still have it. And
that's awesome.
And I'm like, I just can't part with it. Like, it looks pretty beat up and pretty slouchy and not as firm and excited as it was when it was a little brand new Winnie the Pooh, but it's got some miles on it. And I don't know, I can't part with it. I don't know. It seems like I have a connection with it too. There's
a song that I heard years ago that's called If My Pillow Could Talk. And I think, that's like your Winnie the Pooh. And that's like my doll Josephine. If they could talk, what would they say? If they could talk, they could tell the stories of your life. If they can talk, they can take other people on a journey of where you have been. And so I think that that's important. It doesn't matter what they look like. It matters that it's a significant part of who you are. And that's okay, because they tell a story.
I can imagine someone coming into your room and going, what is this old doll thing? Like, oh, why do you keep this? Well, there's a connection there. There's so much that I see in my life. This item has been with me through these things, and I've had conversations with this item, and you weren't around, but it was around for me. So it's a security blanket, I guess, in a way.
And
right?
that's what I call her, a security blanket. Yeah. So after I wrote Josephine, she was that book was never to be my first story that I was going to write. Oh. My first story I was going to write is that years ago, because I had to go through some healing. I had to go through, some raw things of my life to look at myself in the mirror and see what I saw, and then be able to change, what I saw through a lot of the healing that I had gone through. So years ago, I went to a counselor, and she was the kind of counselor that she didn't give me a whole bunch of do's and don'ts. She didn't say, hey, I want you to write this, 15 minutes a day. I want you to do this 10 minutes a day. She was a counselor that sat me down and said, let's talk about your stories. Let's talk about some of the things that happened. And then we would sit in silence until God would present a scene of my life. And then she'd say, let's ask God where he was in this. Instead of me being, because I was so angry thinking, where were you, God? Why didn't you protect me? Why weren't you there for me? What were you thinking? You're sitting on the throne room and your child is, getting broken into pieces.
Yeah.
And I realized through that kind of counseling, I realized that God was always with me, that he never forsook me. He never turned his back on me, but I had to see the story from his point of view and from that side. So one of our last counseling sessions is that she said, I want you to just sit and I want you to ask God for a word picture of your life. I want you to ask God for something that you can hang on to know that he has never left you. He has never forsaken you. He's never turned your back on you. And so I sat in silence and I didn't move for a good 3-4 minutes. And a vision came, and it was a vision of a heart, a true heart that beats within inside of us. And there were all these pockets inside of the heart and little bows. So they looked like gifts. So as I began to start looking, I began to see the gifts that he had given to me in the midst of the storms. That when I thought that he wasn't there for me, he showed me something that he gave to me in the midst of the storm, whether it was a person, a place, a thing, and those were the gifts. And those gifts were open up to me throughout my whole life to show me that he was always there for me. So I wrote, my second book was titled The Treasures of My Heart. And they are little tidbit stories of the gifts that I saw that were packaged just for me within my heart. And so that was my second book that actually came out on St. Patrick's Day. I had a grandson that passed away 5 years ago this St. Patrick's Day, and I wanted to do something to honor, his death and honor the memorial of my grandson, Isaac. And so I had my book published and went live this past on St. Patrick's Day. So that
Nice.
one's called The Treasures of My Heart. So it looks like this.
There you go. Beautiful.
So it's just hearts with all these different little gifts that were given to me throughout my life.
I love the significance of the day you launched the book too. That's a constant reminder for you as well of a memory that's hard to think about, and maybe something that brings you down in the moment, but then to know that you put something new out there and given new life to this book on
Absolutely.
that date as well. That's nice that you did that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just kind of, it's all, I just did I did a podcast just recently, and I was a guest on a podcast, and we were talking about, the things that happen, in our early years. And then there's something that happens within men and women in our 40s, that people say that men go through a midlife crisis. I don't think it's a midlife crisis as much it is becoming, as much as they're looking at their past and looking at all the things that they've gone through. And some of it hasn't been grand. We've all made bad choices and bad decisions, or the things that we've been through, but there's something that happens when we're in our 40s. And I was telling him the whole story of when I turned 40, I had a promised land party. That because the Bible talks about the Israelites and how they were in the desert for 39 years. And then the 40th year, they walked into the promised land. And I think that all of us in our lives, there's something about that happens within our life that when we reach a certain point, we reach a certain age, that we say, you know what? I'm not going to let the past define me anymore. I'm not going to let the past take over my present. I'm not going to let the past decisions, the bad decisions, the good decisions, whatever decision that I made that altered my life, I'm not going to let it define the next stage of my life. So when I turned 40, there was something that happened within inside of my heart that showed me that I was now in the promised land. And now that I'm in my 50s is the year of Jubilee. It's the year that the Israelites, the Jewish culture, that's their year of forgiveness. That's their year of Jubilee. That's their year of dancing. That's their year of praise. And I think that those are so significant in our lives if we can look that every stage of our life, every step that we're taking in our life leads us to the next step. And, I'm going to be 55, which in January, I'm going to be 55, which now I can get McDonald's coffee for free and get some 10% discounts and, things like that, but there's something that's happening within inside of my soul and within inside of my spirit that's saying, now is the time. Now is the time that you get to move on. You get to move forward. And then plus 55 is the number 5 is the number of grace, so God's giving me more grace and grace, to be able to continue on this journey. So I think that if we can, as people, look at the stages of our lives and say that it's like a metamorphosis that is constantly happening. In order for a caterpillar to even go into its cocoon, they have to shed their skin 7 times before that happens. So we have spent our lives shedding that skin, for us to be put in that cocoon to turn out to be this beautiful butterfly. And I think that that's where I'm at today. That's why I can write. That's why, I've done, these as guests on podcasts and been able to share my story and be able to share, what's happening in my life. It's because I have finally know that I am becoming.
Nice.
And I don't have to look back to the past. The future is so bright. And so, I just encourage that to listeners that don't take any step for granted. Right. Because the next step leads you to the next step and to the next step. And really look to the people that have gone before you and realize that they were placed before you because their lives are going to be used to teach you. And then your life is going to be used to teach somebody else's.
I love the reference back to butterflies as well, and caterpillars, because when a caterpillar is transforming into a butterfly, it's not like they have everything except the wings, and somebody brings them the wings at the end of the process and gives you the wings, right? Everything they needed to become a butterfly is included in the caterpillar, right? Everything they need, it's all there. It's just a matter of going from one to the next, right? And you don't need anything from anyone else. It's built right into who you are as a caterpillar, that your journey and your destination is to be that butterfly. So
absolutely,
we have everything we need in us now, even as we transform, to be that thing, that person we want to become, right? Without any additional things coming from an outside source, we have everything we need. It's all inside of us already.
Absolutely. And if we can look, I tell women all the time, I want you to get up in the morning and I want you to look in the mirror every morning and say, I have survived everything that has happened to me and I have become my own hero within me. Mm-hmm. Because I think that that's so important, is that I am still living no matter what has happened to me, no matter what I have been through. I am still living every single day and being able to see the reflection in the mirror of myself and be able to say, I am my own hero. You are the first hero in your life. When we're looking for we're going, oh, Superman's my hero. The police officer's my hero. My mommy's my hero. No, you are your hero. Yeah. You are the one that has the cape on, that you have survived. You are the one that was able to walk through that trauma and come out of that. You are the one that had life burn you up. Yeah. And now you're in ashes, but yet those ashes turned into beauty. And if we don't go through the fire, we cannot come out as gold. Gold is the strongest metal. It's because it's gone through the fire. Mm-hmm. And that's who you are. And if people could realize that and know that, wear your crown. I tell women all the time, fix your crown, because you are the daughter of a king. Fix the crown. You don't need to have it walked around, slanted. Fix it, because you are royalty. And everything you have gone through has made you who you are today. Yeah. And rejoice in that. Don't give that up.
You talk about the experience as a child of having someone speak into your life, your teacher, and you didn't get it really in the moment. You didn't really understand what was happening, but now in hindsight, you understand that moment was really important. Have you had the opportunity now as an adult to speak into the life of someone in your world? Now you're the teacher doing that same thing to someone else. Have you had the opportunity to speak life into somebody?
Well, I am a mother of 6. So that's, all of my children are adult children now. And I do have 13, grandchildren. I have 12 living grandchildren. I did spend 27 years homeschooling my children. So I was able to be the one that laid the foundation, for their lives, for them to, go out and to become something. I was very, very careful on the words that I spoke, over their lives, because I knew that those words that we speak into people's lives, a lot of times those are who we become, and it's so detrimental when you don't speak life into your children. I remember one of my daughters, they went out to went out to their friend's house, and they came home, and, she was like 5 or 6, and she goes, Mommy, they swore. And I'm like, they did? And she goes, yeah, they swore. And I said, can you tell me what they said? And she goes, Mommy, I can't say it. And I said, can you whisper it in my ear? And she said, Mommy, they said the word brat. They called their daughter a brat, my friend a brat, because that was a word we did not use because I didn't allow people. My kids laugh about it today. I have identical twin boys. And people would always say, oh, my goodness, double trouble. And I go, oh, no, double blessing, that they were my double blessing, because I just believe that those words that you speak, that's what they become. Yeah. And so I am definitely somebody that used words of affirmation. That was my love language for a lot of years. I realized I read this book called The 5 Languages of Love. Yeah. And words of affirmation was definitely something that I needed in my life. But I realized it was because I was so broken and so hurt that I needed those words spoken in life. But I realize now that each one of those gifts, each one of those 5 love languages that they call them, I needed them all in different times in my life, so it wasn't just, oh my goodness, I'm just a words of affirmation person. And that's who I think it just depends on the condition of your heart. Now I'm more of a quality time person, that I want quality time with somebody. Words of affirmation are great, but I can speak life to myself now because I'm not broken anymore.
It's interesting that our default setting on sayings like double trouble and stuff like that is always kind of to the negative. It's not to the positive as a default. Like when you hear people talk about the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. I'm like, wait, that's not very nice. How about keep it super simple? That's better than keep it simple, stupid. How about super simple? Isn't that better than stupid? Like, why do we have that word in there? That doesn't build you up. That tears you down. So
yeah, I totally agree with you. I totally agree. And words have life.
Yeah. And meaning.
I think about that, since we're talking about that, I think about my name. A lot of people are probably wondering, oh my goodness, is that really her real name? Is she really named Bambi? And so for my whole life, when I was a kid, I was bullied a lot because of my name. People made fun of my name as I became a teenager. I didn't go to proms. I didn't go to dances. I didn't date, people because they didn't want to be known that they're dating Bambi. And then when I got married, none of my husbands would call me by name. They would just make fun of my name and things like that. If I met a guy out on the street, or any activities that we're at, guys would say, oh, where are you dancing tonight?
Oh,
thinking that it's a show name, it's, a dancer's name. And I would begin to make jokes. I'm a mother of 6. I've never been on a pole, trying to make it, funny and stuff like that. But when I was like 32, 33 years old, I finally had it. And I wanted to change my name to Janet. And so I went to the courts and found out that it costs about $800 that you can change your name for about $800. So I was like, okay, that's an idea. I can change my name. But I went to the beach, because that's where God speaks to me. And that's where I can get angry and frustrated. And he's still there for me. So I went to Lake Erie and I sat on a rock and I cried out to God. And I said, you knew me from the foundations of time. You were the one that called me by name. My mother just said it, but you had already planned it. Yeah. And so I went through everything that I had gone through, how dare this happen to me, blah, blah, blah. And, and I just vomited it on God. And I said, my name's not even in a name book. There's not even a meaning for my name. So you gave me a name that had no meaning. So do I have any meaning in my own life?
Wow. So
I then said, I'm going to go back to the bookstore. I'm going to go one more time. And if my name is not there tomorrow morning, I'm going to the courts and I'm going to change my name. And nobody gives, I don't know who I thought I was giving God an ultimatum, but I had it. Yeah. So I went to that bookstore. I got the name books off of the shelf. I went to Barnes and Noble, sat there at the table, and now I'm afraid because I just gave God an ultimatum, what in the world? How dare me do this? But I sat there for a second, and my first name is Bambi, and my middle name is Lynn. So I looked up my name, and my name put together means holy child.
Wow.
And I was like, okay, God, I'm done. Have a great day. And I'm going to live, and I'm going to, I'm going to live with my name with honor and blessing. So my name is not pole dancer. My name is Holy Child.
Wow.
So, that God could show me that at that moment and at that time, that was a gift that he had given to me. That was a treasure that he had given to me to realize, Bambi, every time somebody says your name, they're saying Holy Child, and they're announcing to the world and to the air that you are a holy child.
Wow.
So I advise people all the time, go look up your name. Go find out what your name really means.
Yeah.
Forget about what this world says you are. Let's see who God says you are and look up your name, because your name has a meaning. Your name was your name from the foundations of time. And there's something special about your name of why he called you that name.
Okay, let's go back one more time to the teacher speaking words of life into you, and you didn't understand it in the moment. You just did that for the listener who's maybe struggling with their name or their thing, their story. You
Absolutely.
just did to the listener what happened to you as a child from that amazing teacher that you didn't even really get along with in the moment, right? You just did that for the listener today. So thank you for speaking life into us by just that story.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. And I think that if we speak more into people's lives, and call them forth into greatness, oh my goodness, what we could do with just a seed, just a seed of hope, what orchards we can build. I don't think that this is by accident that God has opened up opportunities for me to be able to speak on podcasts. It is not by accident. It is by design. And it's not by accident that it is now, because I believe that it's such a time as this. It's kind of like the story of Esther. Esther in the Bible, she probably had her whole life ahead of her and everything ready, but yet the king wanted to find a queen. So all these women were forced, into the castle to get dressed up and to get beautified, to go to be with the king to see whether he wanted her to be, and she was in Israel, and she was in Israel. She was a Jew. She was an Israelite. But God used her for such a time as that to save her people. And I think that each one of us have a plan and a purpose for our lives. Nothing that we do, if we can find the why we were born, kind of like Simon Sinek, has that book, The Motivational Speaker, the why. If you can find the why of why you are here, you will move mountains. And then you'll never have to worry if you're in the right spot, if you're in the right time, if you're in the right moment, because now you know without a shadow of a doubt, you have been created for such a time as this.
Growing up, did you ever have an affinity for the cartoon Bambi at all, knowing that was out there? Because one thing that comes to mind when I think Bambi is Bambi, the cartoon, was never really good on ice, kind of falling and stuff. And I'm being from Buffalo, I didn't know if you were really good at falling down on ice, because I'm terrible. I would just wipe out.
Oh my goodness, what an analogy. I never even thought about that. And when you think about the story of Bambi, she loses her mother. She has to go out and you have to remember, Bambi was a boy.
Right.
Which is another thing, is that here, most Bambis, there's, since 1960, there's been 6,842 of us that have been born that have been named Bambi. Only a Bambi would know that.
And you know that, in this moment. Yes, of course.
But none of them are boys. And if you look at this story, I guess I never even thought about the analogy or the word picture of Bambi, of, having to be alone. And I've spent a lot of time, not being wanted and being a black sheep and falling on the ice, absolutely, over and over again. But you know what? It's not the falling that matters. It's the getting back up and trying again.
Yeah.
And which is kind of cool. Bambi at the end of the story, Bambi's a buck, but he quote unquote, marries Faline, and they have twins, and I have twins. So that's kind of, there is a kind of cool. None of my children will name their children after me. So I went to Georgia. I live in Georgia, but I went into the Atlantic district of part of Georgia, and I work for the Nielsen TV rating. So I used to have to travel all over the country.
Wow.
And I went to the Cabbage Patch, the original Cabbage Patch hospital. And I purchased a Cabbage Patch for each one of my grandchildren, and all of their birth certificates say their name is Bambi Lynn.
Of course.
They won't name their children after me, so you know what? Then I'm going to name every Cabbage Patch. I'm done.
Done. I did it. I achieved it. That's good. It's amazing. And the other thing too about Bambi had Thumper, right?
Which is her best friend.
Right, and you had Josephine.
Yes.
So there's a connection there too. So anyways, it's interesting. So
yeah, my only one daughter. I have one daughter that, she's not my favorite daughter, but she's the most connected to me because I had her at 16. And so I had to grow up, with her. And she does have a tattoo of Bambi on her ankle for me.
Oh, nice.
So she'll get more money in the will.
There you go. And all the other ones are like, dang, I need a tattoo now.
Exactly. Mom's dying. She's on her deathbed.
We're going to go to the tattoo shop. Yeah, I like it. So, okay, my podcast is living the next chapter. So I got to ask, how are you living your next chapter? What's coming up for you? Like down the road, baby?
I'm writing my third book.
Yep.
I've written my third book and it's just in editing, the beginning stages. It's called The God Who Sees. It is the title comes from the story of Hagar, which she was the concubine of Abraham, and Sarah threw her out into the desert. And she was the one that got to name God, the God who sees, that he sees everything that we go through. So I've taken 29 different women of the Bible, and I've made each one of them more relatable in today. So like each story, there's a story of Moses' mother, Jochebed, how she had to give up her child. And so I talk about adoption and, in that aspect. There is a story of Tamar. Tamar was a girl that was one of David's children, but her brother was another of David's children, and her brother raped her. So I talk about the blended family, to be careful who you allow in your home and who you allow in your space. So there's all these different, stories that I have taken, and I have created them to be more relatable today. I didn't change the scripture. I just gave them a story.
Yeah.
That is my book that I'm working on now. I also am, working on doing as many interviews as I can on podcast, and, for me to be able to speak to the nations, me to be able to, speak, to thousands of other people that I would never be able to reach, in my sphere. Also, I just look at years ago, God gave me a dream that I was walking on stage, and there was a podium, and there were the people all out in the audience, and all of the audience were like, they looked like homeless people, and they were dirty and they were ragged, and they had words written across their chest, and some of them were unforgiven, dirty, scarred, all the names, all the negative names of life. And as I began to speak and began to give my testimony, their clothing changed. They were starting to look clean, and they were starting to sit up straight, and they had words, courageous, brave, forgiven, set free, the daughter of a king. So their clothing had began to change, and so had their names begin to change. So I'm seeing, where God's taken that dream now, where God has taken that vision that he gave to me years ago, on this journey of being an author, telling my story, captivating an audience, and being able to be somebody in somebody's life that sees their lives and sees the brokenness, but being somebody that is able to help put them back together, that my story will be used to bring people back together, and that they can also walk this journey of becoming who they were always meant to be. So that is my next chapter. I am going on my very first cruise. So doing that in December, going to spend, the last 5 years, I spent New Year's in bed because, I'm getting old, and what do you do on New Year's anyhow? So, but this year I'm spending it on a ship, and celebrating New Year's with, 2,200 other people that decided, to do a cruise on New Year's. And then a week later after that, I become a senior citizen. So I gotta be doing something before that happens.
Going out with a bang. There you go.
Going out with a bang.
Yeah,
So
I love it.
Yeah, so that is, my next chapter. My next chapter is to continue to find me, continue to rejoice in who I am, and be able to use what God has done in my life to bring healing to others. So I'm excited for my next chapter, and we'll see where it goes.
I love it. Well, it's great having you on. I love how you frame everything we talk about today. And again, speaking life into people, I think we all need to do that a little bit better and a little bit more often. And, it's great that you had that experience as a child and you've carried that through as an adult. And you did that you did that for us today. So I really love that you did that. Can you tell us about your website before we go? And
I can.
Where we can get your books and everything.
Yes.
Come on.
Well, just like all authors, you can get my book on Amazon, guys. You actually can. But I would rather you get my books on my website called healingthroughstories.com. It's all one word, healingthroughstories.com. You can order my book. I have it on ebook. You can order my books on my website. And then you also can subscribe every week. I do write a story, or I also allow other people to tell their testimony and tell their stories on my website, because I just believe that there is healing through stories. The more that we see other people overcoming things, the more that we look and go, wow, I can do that. This past week, actually had a guest writer that she survived stage 4 cancer. And so she was able to tell her testimony and her story, because, people need to hear that. People need to hear that we don't have to be downhearted, when we get a diagnosis of something. So that is called healingthroughstories.com. And you can get both of my books on there. You can also go on Amazon, or you can also go to Barnes and Nobles or, Books A Million, and you can order, my books from there. I would love the opportunity, if there's anybody in the Georgia, Brunswick area that wants a guest speaker, I would love the opportunity, to be able to speak life into the people that are there. I would love the opportunity to be able to tell my testimony on what God has done. But absolutely go, to my website, healingthroughstories.com, and order my book, The Treasures of My Heart, and my other book, The Journey of Josephine. So order them and pass them on. And I just want to continue to speak life into you, and to know that God's got a purpose for your life. Stand in the mirror every day and call that forth, and know that you are the greatest hero. Put on that cape, put on that crown, and walk with royalty.
There you go. That's how you end a podcast right there, everybody. Bambi, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate that.
Hey, thanks for being here for the Living the Next Chapter podcast. So glad to have you as part of our family of listeners. There's a seat for you just here on Living the Next Chapter, and I'm so happy that you have listened to all the way to the end. Wow, you are now my new bestie. I want to let you know that I host 7 other podcasts on top of Living the Next Chapter. Yep, 8 total. One of them is called the How To Podcast series. If you are thinking, you know what, Dave, this podcast thing seems like a lot of fun. Well, I'll give you a secret. It is. It's a great, amazing, fun time where you can get to meet great people, get your word out there, promote your book, promote your coaching program, whatever you're doing. Podcasting is great. And if you want to learn how to do this, what you're hearing right now, head over to howtopodcast.ca and look up the How to Podcast series on YouTube, whatever app you're listening on. You'll find me there. And I'd love for you to come listen to how to do this. And if you're interested and have questions on how to podcast, reach out to me at howtopodcast.ca. Thank you for listening. Talk soon.